What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another episode of At Home with Mark. Today is season 6, episode 21, and we have a young man that I met at NAMM this year, Scott from BMF Effects. Dude, thank you for doing this. This has been a while in the making. We talked about this in April.
Yes, we did. Yeah, thank you for having me. It's good to be here, man. Good to see
Yeah,
you
man.
again.
Totally. And we have a mutual friend in James from Rewind, and James
Yes.
is the one that told me to come find you, and I said I would like your stuff, so I have to give him a big shout out right now about that. But how you doing, man? I know post NAMM you were you had a lot going on.
Yeah, it's NAMM went really well. It was nice to see an increase in attendance up from last year. Still not quite pre-pandemic levels, but we're doing good, and they're talking about going back to the 2 shows next year. So it was good. As always, I think the best thing is catching up with people
Yeah.
you haven't seen since the last show. I just saw a friend from the UK who I haven't seen in almost 12 years. I got to see Mark Ford, who I haven't seen in 2-3 years, and
Nice.
and always the other thing, meeting people that through social media or through conversation through sales and stuff like that, and finally putting a face to the name is that's always the best part of it for me.
Yeah, totally, man. That was the first time I'd been back since probably 2013.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because I've had multiple discussions with like builders and other people who were at the show, the trade show, as like an entity in a business, who are like, I don't know if I'm going to continue to do it. Like, I don't know where this is going. I don't know if it's going to get better, because it seems like all like the major manufacturers, Fender, Gibson, PRS, are like, we're not doing it anymore. It's not cost effective, kind of thing. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I heard a lot of that. I think, I think it would have been great to see what would have happened if COVID didn't happen. What would have, how the world would have continued turning if it didn't happen. I think a lot of people are still, kind of gun shy about that. I know that for a while they talked about going to a virtual show. For me, it's I'm a touchy feely person. I wanna get in there and I want to try the new guitars, and I want to turn the knobs on the pedals and see what's going on. Will it go away? I don't know. I really don't have an answer. I mean, I think the NAMM organization feels strong enough about it that they're going to go back to the 2-show format next year.
Right.
But honestly, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I hope it comes back and bounces back, because like the one time I went, the one year it was like the first year I'd ever gone in my life. It was always a bucket list thing for me, and I can remember walking in, and I was there kind of as a guest of the company that I work for. They're like, we're going. Do you want to go? Like, we'll give you a free place to stay because you can crash with your other colleague in his hotel room. I was like, heck yeah.
Right.
They're like, just fly yourself out, and you got to, take care of your own food, but like, we'll get you in the show. And I remember I got there, I pulled up in my rental car, parked the car, went in. I couldn't find anybody that I worked with. And I came out and they were all in the lobby. And my boss was like, your face was like, because it was just like sensory overload.
It absolutely is.
This year was different. Like, I didn't experience it because I'd already done it. But man, it's a spectacle. Anybody that hasn't been, I hope it bounces back so you can experience what I experienced that first time. It was awesome, man. So awesome.
I think to get back to your question, I know it's an expense for me, and if I lived anywhere other than Southern California, I don't know that I would have done it.
Right.
If I was building pedals in the Midwest someplace, I'm not sure that I would have crated up everything and had a company move everything out. So I can certainly understand why Gibson doesn't want to, if they're not going to get the turnout we were 3 years ago, no, then it's not cost effective for them. I can understand that. And you're talking about companies that rent out, the top, a third of the top floor, half of the top floor. These are guys, the show expenses are something that I couldn't even begin to fathom.
Right.
So for me, it's easy in the sense that I'm 30 minutes away from Anaheim. I don't have to worry about a hotel room. I don't have to worry about hiring a trucking company to bring my display out. I rent a U-Haul van, I load it up, I drive out, I set up, and I come back home every night.
Right. That's awesome.
So is it expensive? Sure, but it's not as expensive as it would be. Like I don't think at this point I would truck out to do Nashville.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know
Well,
that would be cost effective.
no. I do think though, for someone like me who's not hip to maybe every single company, like and James is actually in here. James is in here right now saying hello.
There is. Hey James, what's up?
And then Visual Guy's in here too. They're both hanging out.
Yeah, Jacob, right on.
So, but what I was gonna say is for me to run into you and James to be like, you got to go find Scott. I think you'll like what he's doing. And then for you to be so gracious with your time and like talk to me and my buddy Chris about your whole line, dude. Like, I was really blown away, not only by like the line of pedals that you've built and the kind of stuff that you've been doing for almost 2 decades, right? So is it 18 years that you said you've been building?
18 years this year.
Yeah, 2 decades of like knowledge and building this stuff and grinding. That is cool in and of itself, but like to take the time to like show us what you've got going on. And then I was like blown away by your wah stuff. We can get into that later. But like I was so pleased to meet you, and you were so gracious with your time. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
Like it was great. But all right, so let me jump back. So usually when I start this show, Scott, I have a question that I ask everybody.
Okay.
And that question is, what is your earliest musical memory?
It's a toss-up between Sgt. Pepper and the soundtrack to the Woodstock album.
Oh, okay, cool. Just hearing it in the house?
I had inherited my father's only 19 years older than me, so I grew up on I was born in '69. I grew up listening to what was contemporary at that time. So I grew up on the Beatles. I grew up on Jethro Tull, Marshall Tucker, all the stuff that my father was listening to because he was 19, 20, 21, 22. The reason my parents didn't go to Woodstock is because I was due in 4 weeks. I feel really terrible about that. But I absolutely remember Sgt. Pepper. I remember the first song I can really put my finger on it and hearing and going, what drew me to guitar is Going Home by 10 Years After at Woodstock. And not knowing what was going on. My father plays guitar, so there was that desire to be like him, to do whatever he wanted to do, or whatever he was doing. But I can remember listening to Going Home on the Woodstock album and Alvin Lee just tearing it up and going, I don't know what that is, but that's what I want to do.
Okay.
Whatever's going on there.
How old were you at that time when you got the bug?
5, 6, maybe.
Oh wow, man!
I'm trying to think, because my brother's 5 years younger than me, and I can remember listening to those records before he was born. Man. So yeah, somewhere about 4 or 5, and then it just kind of kept on going.
And so your dad, you said, played guitar.
Still does, yeah.
Still does. Okay,
Still
cool.
Does.
So when did you pick that up? Like, when were you like, can I do that?
Oh, I mean, I fooled around with it, and as a kid, when no one's looking, you always go and grab your dad's guitar and stuff like that. So I think I probably first, I can remember first asking him to show me how to play or something like that. And I think he gave me, the Mel Bay Easy Guitar book and circled 3 chords and said, learn these. And I think that was probably somewhere around 6 or 7. And lost. I'm not one of those guys who's been playing since they were 7. Right. I think I lost interest in it and didn't pick it up until 15. And I remember Dad came home from work with a Memphis Les Paul copy and a JMF practice amp that somebody was selling where he worked. They had like a bulletin board, and somebody said, practice guitar and amp, $50 or whatever, and he bought that, brought it home, and that's when I started. Picking up and dropping the needle on records, and as soon as somebody showed me a power chord, that was it. Because if you know a power chord, you could figure out just about, especially all the stuff I was listening to. And I think
Yeah.
that's so really from 15 on is the real starting point.
Okay. Now, what was the first? Did you have like at this point now it's vintage, but like was there any guitars that you played that would now be considered very valuable vintage instruments since you like kind of came in that era? Like I wonder
Um,
how much is like a 63 Strat in like 1974? You know what I mean? Like I've never looked up those numbers, but
I remember I can remember my dad buying his first, what he'll tell you was his first real guitar, which was a gold top Les Paul Deluxe. I mean, he bought it at Banco's Music in Ansonia, Connecticut. I remember that.
dang.
And again, it's right around that 4, 5, 6 year old mark. And periodically I'll look one up and I'll go, hey, you know what that gold top's worth today? And he just kind of gets quiet. I'm trying to, I think my first, I actually I bought a 63 Strat in, it's got 90 or 91.
Oh, okay.
And I think I paid $2,100 for it, which was a lot of money at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially for a 19-year-old.
Yeah.
And I remember, because I'm close to Guitar Center in Hollywood, and they got this fantastic vintage room, and I remember the first time I went in there and seeing 63 Strats were now $20,000, and I'm going, oh my God, that's a down payment on a house.
I know.
I'm trying to remember like what would have been my first real guitar. I remember the first time I came to California, my dad allowed me to cash out a savings bond, and I bought a Kramer Striker 100.
Nice.
It's weird because I actually bought it at a store that it used to be less than a mile from where I live now, and it had changed hands, or changed business types several times. About 10 years ago, it became a guitar store again. But when I lived in Connecticut, I had a really good friend who ran a used guitar store about 20 minutes from where I lived. And, I think about the things that I bought from him or the things that I saw come through. If I had known then what I know now, I would have been, buying up 70 Strats when they were $200 because nobody wants them. I remember when no one wanted Les Pauls. I remember, pre Guns N' Roses when, Les Pauls were $400.
Man, that's crazy. Now, what was the stigma then? Was it just that they were too heavy? Like people weren't like hip to like wanted lighter instruments, or?
I think, you had a couple things going on. My opinion, Les Pauls were, everybody, Page had one, Joe Perry played one. They were a 70s guitar, for lack of a better term. And I think as you got into, glam metal and hair metal and thrash and all that stuff, you didn't see bands playing Les Pauls.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was playing Jacksons or Charvels or, certainly when Metallica kicked off, the Flying V kind of came back, and then out of nowhere, you had Guns N' Roses and you had Slash, who was playing, for the most part, only Les Pauls. The occasional BC Rich, and I think that really, that was the end of hair metal. When between grunge and kind of what Guns was doing and came out of that time, and in these bands, you now saw these bands that were gaining popularity that were using Les Pauls, and I think that's when you really started to see the demand for them again.
Yeah,
but I think through the 80s, yeah, you had collectors. Absolutely, you had collectors that knew that 59 Les Paul was going to be worth something, and they were going for big money then. But really? I think as for the kid-driven market, the kid who sat there and read Circus and Hit Parader and everything, we were seeing Charvel, Jackson, pointy neon guitars, and that's what we wanted.
Yeah. You know what's interesting about that is like I'm a 79 baby, and I can remember like when I got into guitar, it was during the grunge era. Like I started playing in like 92, 91.
Mhm.
And I can remember going into the stores in 91 and looking at guitars and like seeing like a gem on the wall or something like that. Like all the like the pointy guitars that we're talking about.
Right.
And then at some point it changed. You started to see the Jaguars and the Jazz Masters, and you
Hmm.
started to see more Strats and more Les Pauls kind of infiltrate that wall. And I've never really thought about it in terms of like the sea change of how the music industry shifted. So therefore, the popularity of certain guitars are going to shift as well. Because I feel like some of that stuff's coming back now. Like some of that like Jackson like super strat stuff is kind of making its way back into people's hands. Because I think people are, you can tell me if you feel like I'm wrong on this, but I feel like people are kind of almost over the vanilla brand. You know what I mean? Like they want something different or left of center in a way.
I mean, I think there's always a desire to, have your guitar, whatever
Right.
that may be. I think there's always going to be a super strat. I
Yeah.
think I think just sheer versatility. But I mean, you were you're talking about demand or desire changing with what was going on. I mean, think about it when Stevie Ray was at his peak. Every kid wanted a Strat and a tube screamer. You know,
Right.
you have guitar player or guitar players driving the market. So you had Stevie Ray took off like a rocket, and then everybody wanted a Strat. That's why I bought a '63. I wanted to sound like him.
Right.
I wasn't gonna get that any other way. I had to have a vintage Strat.
Right.
You know?
Was that a Wayne's World moment for you when you found that guitar?
Uh, I'm trying to. I probably had it before Wayne's World.
Just meaning, was it
I,
like, ah, like,
yeah, I think it was the first one. I think I was aware enough at the time that that was definitely during a time when everybody was staying away from 70 Strats. Nobody had anything good to say about 70 Strats, no matter how cheap they were. You weren't going to buy a CBS Strat. Um, yeah, and I remember busting my hump to get that money together.
yeah, it's like
And
$2,100 you said at
20,
that
yeah,
time?
21.
Man. And that's like a normal like boutique low end guitar now, which is crazy.
Yeah, yeah,
This is
yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I think there's everybody's gonna always want to make their guitar theirs. There's gonna have to be something special about it, no matter whether it's a Gibson, a mass produced, a Gibson custom shop, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
I think I have, out of all the guitars I have, I think only my lap steels are stock. I think everything else has been modified to some degree. Whether it's preference on my part, I'm a huge fan of James's pickups. So,
Mm-hmm.
90, with the exception of my Gretsch, I think everything has got a set of his pickups in it.
Yeah. Man, talk about like next level. Like I had no clue how much his pickups were going to bring my one Strat back to life. Like it totally changed everything for me when I heard that.
Absolutely does.
Yeah, it's
And
nuts.
I love his approach and respect his approach to pickups, especially PAFs. I mean, this is the man. To that. I mean, all his pickups stand out for me, and I'm fortunate enough to own several sets where if I want to change up the sound of my Les Paul, I have options. But two that really stand out for me, I had ended up with a late 50s P90. I was looking for a new pickup for my Les Paul Jr., and through timing and sheer luck, I ended up with an original late 50s P90 for a ridiculous price. And almost immediately, I had, I was getting people offering to double what I paid for it. And James and I were going back and forth, and I said, "Hey, this is what I got." And I think he was actually the one I first sent pictures to and said, "Is this what I, can you verify what this is? Is this what I think it is?" And he wound me, his version of a late 50s and nailed it.
Yeah.
Enough so that I turned around without hesitation, without regret, and sold the original.
Yeah.
And then the next time he did it, I had gotten a hold of the Epiphone Bonamassa Firebird. I had decided that I finally wanted a Firebird, and it had to be a 1, and that I could afford that. And I was reading through forum posts, and the first thing, it seemed like a lot of people just ripped the pickup out of it without even really giving it a chance, which really surprised me because I was blown away by that pickup. And there are guys out there that'll tell you that, yeah, that Epiphone did a phenomenal job creating this pickup. I mean, it's the right output. It's got a little hint of compression of it. It was certainly, for what I know and what I've heard, a more accurate Firebird than these ceramic ones, the ceramic magnet ones that come in the Firebird these days that are measuring crazy outputs.
Right.
And you can't get that you can't buy that pickup by itself. There's a part number for it. You can look it up. It'll reference it, but you can't buy that pickup by itself. So I gathered all the information I possibly could about it, and I sent it all to James, and he sent me back a Firebird pickup that's now sitting in my Gisson custom shop Firebird, and again, nailed it.
Yeah, he's a genius with that stuff, man.
Yeah.
It's absolutely crazy. All right, let me shift the focus really quick. I want to talk to you about what you do and your line of pedals, and mostly like how it relates to the music that you love and you listen to. You talk about Mark Ford. Mark's actually my last guest next week of the season.
Oh, nice.
He's coming on next week.
Nice.
But like just like how that inspires what you do in terms of the sounds that you're hearing, because maybe you can explain to me how this works. I'm fascinated. I don't understand. I've built one kit pedal that my one pedal builder friend walked me through and taught me how to solder. That was my soldering like experience for the first time. But what I don't understand for someone who's creating circuits and hearing stuff in your head, how do you take that audio information that's floating around in your brain and identify the parts needed to bring it to life? I just don't understand how that works. It's so fascinating to me how you guys do this.
Trial and error for me.
That's it. Okay.
For me, I do. I know there are builders out there who have who are electrical engineers. There are guys who are way smarter than I am when it comes to this. There are guys who can they're I'm way over my head when it comes to their depth of knowledge. It's trial and error for me. It's I what started this was finding sounds that sounds I had heard, guitar tones I had heard that I wasn't finding with pedals that were readily available. And like some guys, I mean, I started off modifying stuff. It just went from there. But it's trial and error. It's plug and play, and let's swap out this part and see what it does. And even if it doesn't make sense on paper, if it makes sense to my ears, then it stays. I have a drawer full of diodes. That if I'm doing an op amp diode pedal, I got a drawer full of each, and I just sit there and swap them out. And guys will tell you, it doesn't make you can't hear anything. It doesn't make a difference. I'm certainly not going to get into an argument on the internet about it, but there are
happen
things
regardless.
And I try my best to stay out of those. But I don't necessarily subscribe to mojo parts. I try really hard, especially with any pedal that I plan on offering or want to offer for any long period of time, to not use parts that are obsolete or that I can't get again, or that basically I'm going to make 50 of these pedals and turn around and say, that's it, I'm out of parts.
Right.
If I don't think it's fair to do something that a lot of people like and then say, well, too bad, you're out of luck.
Right. Yeah.
So
how much research goes into that, Scott? Like how much research goes into like, you find a part that you like to use and you hope that it's readily available, or are you like, I know this is sourceable from the get-go?
For the most part, I try to make sure that everything's readily available. With through hole components slowly becoming obsolete, I'm signed up for just about everybody's end of life notice. And when I get those, then I'll start looking at remaining inventories and buy up stuff. But I mean, there's not a whole lot of parts that I do that with. There's a couple diodes where last month I bought out, I think, the last 4,000.
Oh, dang.
Period.
Yeah.
And but it's also, I mean, the odd thing about it is that it wasn't a part that you see show up in other pedals or anything. It wasn't a diode that you hear people talk about. It wasn't one of the the common ones. But yeah, it's plug and play. It's sit there and okay, I'm not getting, I like this, but let's see what this does. Or I'm not liking the way this sounds, but what happens if I pair it with this? And then if it's something that I really like, yeah, at that point I start looking around and I see, okay, what's the availability like? If I decide that this is the way I'm going to go, how difficult is it going to be to sustain this?
Because what I find is really also interesting about the pedal industry too is the whole amp in a box thing is it's hard for me to wrap my head around. I've played a couple that I've been like, oh wow, this is really great, but like, how do you? What are your thoughts on that? Like, is it something that you think is a good viable option for people who can't afford a Silver Jubilee, so they're going to get this pedal that's like a Silver Jubilee in a box, or if it's like a Plexi in a box or whatever. Like, how do you feel about those types of designs being like more of an affordable option for people? Or are you like, I don't know if I go like get a decent amp and get some overdrive pedals that can get you close?
I'm totally cool with that. However, tone is subjective. What you think is good might be different from what I think is good, might be different from what James thinks is good, and so on and so on. However you get your tone, I'm totally cool with that. My father always always said something. For years, I would always, I was convinced I needed a vibratone, and I would go find one, and then I'd have to lug it up a flight of stairs and go, well, this was stupid, and sell it. And my dad would say, he goes, anybody in the audience isn't going to know whether you're using a real vibratone or whether you're using a Leslie Sim. Anybody standing 30 feet away isn't going to know the difference. Which is, look at the sheer number of touring musicians that are using, modelers or, pod pros when those were the thing. These guys who are using, I'm really bad because I'm an analog guy in a digital world, that's for sure. But my dad was talking about it. He keeps up on this stuff, and I guess now the big thing is those amps that basically are the size of a large pedal.
Yeah.
That go on your pedal board, and it gets fed out to the PA or whatever. And these guys that are using those, I mean, can you tell that he's not running a stack of Marshalls somewhere?
No, not normally. Yeah.
So however people get their tone, I have no complaints, no qualms, no nothing. That being said, I mean, I've sat in front of a JTM 45 wide open, and and hit chords. That's there's something to be said for air moving, and feeling it. And I think once you get the power tubes going, you get the preamp tubes going, you get the speakers going, and everything's just working. I don't think you're going to get that in a box. But at the same time, realistically, how often are you going to get to crank a JTM 45?
Right. That's the thing.
Yeah. Without doing permanent damage or having the cops called on you.
Yeah. Structural damage to your home as well. Yeah.
So, however you get there, and if I could be a part of that, then hey, cool with me.
What's your most favorite amp that you've ever plugged into? Like, thinking about a story like that, like what's a moment where you sat in front of something and you played it and you're like, oh my God, this is it?
Oh man, there's a couple. Sovtek MiG 50 through a 412 Marshall.
Oh dang, yeah. I've heard a lot about that amp in the past couple of years.
Yeah, and it's basically a basement. and I can remember when, again, they were $100, $200, and now, they've become collectible. That was one. Here you go. Pig Nose G40 through a
Really?
412 cabinet.
That's
Yep.
crazy. Really? Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yep. Fender Vibro King. I played one of those again a couple months ago, and I'd forgotten how gorgeous the cleans were.
Is that a 310 cab combo?
310.
Dude,
Yeah.
those things, doesn't Gary Clark Jr. play those, or he used to play those? I can't remember.
Not
They're
really sure.
They're
very
loud
loud.
as hell.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I mean,
really
very
loud.
gorgeous cleans. I have a client who has um, a really early JTM 45 replica that sounds. I mean, he went all out. Got as close to new old stock as he could, wherever he could, and I mean, it's a gorgeous sounding amp.
That's awesome.
I'm a big fan of the car Imperial. That's my guilty pleasure. I have 6 at this point.
Nice. I had a Mercury V. I liked that a lot. Or a Mercury. Can't remember the car amp. Yeah, that was a good amp. He's building some cool stuff. So for your pedal line, when you're testing stuff, what are you playing through when you're testing these? Like, are you testing it through one of your favorite amps? Or are you using something that's more like an everyman's amp kind of thing?
I have voice tested and released every single pedal with either a car Rambler or the car Imperial. And
Okay.
A Telecaster.
Okay. What did
one
you
guitar,
have?
One amp.
Did you have a Tele at NAMM, or was that a Strat?
Strat.
Was it yellow?
Yeah, it was like a 70s that had turned nicotine yellow.
Okay.
So
yeah.
It was a Mark Jenny body. It was a custom shop neck, and then it had been set up for a super Strat. I only wanted to. Last time I did NAMM, I had 3 different guitars and 47 sets of backups for everything. And this time I'm like, I'm bringing the bare minimum. And I said, okay, well, I need one guitar that'll basically cover just about everything. So I had the Strat set up as a super Strat. So we had a humbucker, we had single coils, and you can get a fairly good idea of what it was going to sound, what my stuff would sound like with just about anything.
Yeah, that's great. All right, so you test it with the Tele, test it with the car stuff. Anything in particular in terms of like when you're listening for, like, let's just talk about like pick what's your favorite pedal that you're building right now? I know we talked about the Univibe not being your favorite because it's very labor intensive, and every builder says that. That is not a mystery. Everybody says that.
Love the way they sound, hate building them.
But what's your favorite? Like, what's your favorite in your overdrive line?
Godfather 2.
Okay. So when you're testing that, just specifically, what are you listening for once you get it on the bench with that Tele?
I mean, at this point, I know how they're going to turn out. There's no variable in it. So it's basically making sure, and going through the, I didn't accidentally install a scratchy pod, or a switch was wonky from the factory. I'm testing for the functionality. But I mean, inevitably when I build those, I usually end up playing for a couple minutes.
Right. And then you're good to go. So they're pretty consistent. I mean, that's what I can tell from talking to people that have your stuff, and like just listening to what you talked about when you showed Chris and I your pedal line and everything at NAMM, is like everything seems very consistent across the board. Like your QC,
I'm big on that.
Yeah, your QC seems to be the highest level. So
I don't want anybody going, well, hey, I just bought another one of these and it sounds different from the one I had before. And then when a couple years ago I changed over to surface mount hybrid construction method, and basically anything that's tone critical is still through hole. But anything that I can offload to surface mount to make my life easier, I did, and that definitely helps with the consistency. It dropped the noise floor on a bunch of pedals, so they're even quieter. But I mean, even when I was doing all through hole stuff, I want number 5 to sound the same as number 500.
Yeah. Yeah. Does the is like surface mount help things be a little bit more efficient time wise too? Does that help you?
Absolutely. Oh
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard a lot of builders talking about that, and like what you were saying is like, I think you guys, your ears are so tuned to stuff that you can hear the differences between some of those components and whatnot. But like, I'm not gonna tell if it just
I
sounds
no,
great. It sounds great.
yeah, I won't tell you that I can hear the difference. But I mean, as far as time wise, I can give you an example. When I, the Liquid Sky Chorus, when I was doing that, 100% through hole, start to finish on one unit was an hour and a half.
Damn, dude.
Now
Wow.
going through, to a hybrid where again, stuff that's critical to the tone, the things that are in the audio path, things where I think I can hear a difference. I don't know, I'm sure there are people who will tell you that there's no difference whatsoever. But now, I mean, I could knock out a Liquid Sky in 20 minutes.
Man, that's crazy. That's
So
quite drastic.
yeah, so it makes my life easier. It keeps my costs down. It basically, hey, despite the fact that I've been doing this for 18 years, I still make mistakes.
Hmm.
It certainly cut down the human error factor when it came to populating the boards, and it's a lot easier. It's a lot easier on my hands. I'm getting older.
Yeah.
My hands aren't what they were 18 years ago.
Yeah, man.
So, but stuff, certain stuff in the audio path, stuff that needs to be matched, like transistors, the specific stuff I use, like some of the diodes and stuff like that. That'll always stay through.
Yeah.
Stuff that I find that, in my opinion, is critical to the way my pedals sound.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Here, let me pop up. I got a couple of comments and stuff here. So, my friend Max from Zero Amplification says, everyone talks about Marshalls, but you haven't lived until you wound up a high watt DR 103.
I'm absolutely afraid to.
Oh man, dude, there was some the high watt booth. Did you stop by the high watt booth at NAMM?
I didn't leave. If it wasn't for food or the restroom, I didn't leave my booth.
Yeah, I mean they had some crazy stuff going on. They had a bunch of cabinets too. That was pretty neat. That was pretty interesting. Brad saying, let us know if a phaser is coming out sometime.
Yes.
Oh, there you go. Quick
Yeah.
answer on that.
Don't know.
Nice.
I don't know when. I'm not ready to commit to something. But I've been kicking around a couple ideas for a while, and I want to make sure that I can pull it off the way that I want to.
Okay, cool. And then Jake, that chorus is my favorite. That's why I have a chorus on my board. Used to not be cool.
Isn't that the truth?
That is true, man. You know what's funny is I've gotten to know Josh Scott over the years, the past few years,
Hmm.
and we share the same birthday. So I texted him and I was like, "Hey man, where can I want to send you a birthday present. Like, where can I send you something?" And he was like, "Hey, you can send it here." And then what shows up on my birthday, he was at like one of the trade shows and he sent me, because I'm a huge John Scofield fan.
Hmm.
He sent me a Boss CE3 from 1983. And he was like, "You must have this." And he wrote like on his card, it wrote like, "You are John Scofield. You are John Scofield. You are John Scofield." He's the sweetest guy. But the same thing, like I put that on my board because I'm like, I never use chorus, but this thing sounds freaking great. Like,
I mean, I understand why everybody, why chorus gets a bad rap. I mean, it was definitely overused in the '80s, but it's still to this. I've never changed my opinion on it. It is one of my favorite effect pedals. When used right, it's an absolutely gorgeous thing. And it would be funny for years because I would say, everybody sits there and talks about how much they hate chorus, but it's one of my top selling pedals, so somebody's buying it. Some guys, I don't know if they're putting them somewhere, in their rack cabinet and it's hidden or whatever. But yeah, somebody, and it's nice. We're now seeing that stigma kind of wear off, which is good.
and I'm hearing it more and more too in bands that I love. Like, there's a band called Dawes. I don't know if you're familiar with Dawes, but they're an LA band.
Mhm.
But Taylor, the lead singer guitar player, he has like just like the subtlest chorus.
Right.
And like when he kicks it in, when he's soloing, it's like you can barely hear it. It's there, but
Right.
it's just kind of rounding out his tone a little bit more and giving a little bit more bite and more like kind of presence in the mix. And I think people don't think of using chorus that way. They think of it as an effect, like a hard effect. Like obviously
Right.
you turn something on, but there's more applicable things that you can use it for as a guitarist for sure.
And I mean,
Um,
that's on mine. That's why I wanted to include the blend knob, because
yeah,
with it blended all the way down, you could play it. You can you don't realize that it's on until you actually turn it off.
yeah,
That's
totally,
how subtle it can get.
totally.
And and then all of a sudden you go, oh yeah, okay, it was on. There is a difference in sound.
Yeah. I mean, I love it, man. I'm leaving it on there. I'm just like, this is great. I mean, it's it's gonna work for in so many applications for me. Um, let's before we run out of time, the thing that I was most excited about when I came to your booth is your wah and like the
Mhm.
simplicity of swapping out those boards. Like, I'm definitely gonna buy one at some point. Like, can you talk to people like about here? You know what? Let me see if I can pull up. Let me see if I can pull up your website real quick. Let's do this. Let's share the screen because I gotta show these people this stuff. Um, all right, so you should see. Do you see your website?
I do.
All right. So first and foremost, folks, if you have not been to BMF Effects to the website, there's a bunch in the pedal line. You can see this right here. There's a bunch of great stuff to choose from. But when I met Scott at NAMM, this pedal is so interesting. And the thing that really kind of sold me, Scott, when you were talking about the sweep of this pedal,
Mhm.
I've always felt like wah pedals get choked out. There's not enough of a sweep to really get that quacky thing going the way you'd want to get it going. But can you talk a little bit about what your goal was with this?
Yeah, it was really easy. I would listen to it all came about from listening to Hendrix do like Up from the Skies and Rainy Day, Dream Away, Still Raining, Still Dreaming, and it's very well documented that Hendrix either used a Crybaby or a Vox in the studio. But I've had vintage and modern versions of both of those pedals and couldn't get. I wasn't hearing what I was hearing on the record. Now, I mean, we also know that you know Hendrix had his gear modified, so who knows what was really going on inside the wah that he was using for those sessions. But I knew that I wasn't getting it from current production stuff. So that the goal of my wah was I wanted that. I wanted to hear that. So the stock circuit's based on the old Maestro Boomerang. And when I had gotten an original one of those, all of a sudden those sounds, I was starting to hear those sounds. Uh, the wide sweep it kind of came across by accident. It would just happen to be how the shells that I use are manufactured.
Mm-hmm.
And what it does is it allows the combination of the sweep and the potentiometers that I use allows for a really comfortable feel. It gives you a lot of control over the sound from the wah. I mean, you can rock it fast and you can get shaft going and stuff like that, or you can park it in that middle and just rock it very slowly and get a real nice vocal sound. But that's really it was a need, like a lot of my pedals. It was a need for wanting or a need for a sound that I would hear or was hearing in my head that I wasn't getting anywhere else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And,
Okay.
and being fortunate enough that people seem to like or people want to hear what I like to hear.
That's true. Yeah. And what's cool about it too, folks, is like what Scott explained to me is just like there's circuit boards in there that you can swap out if you're going for a different sound within the same, chassis of the same wah pedal, which I thought was absolutely friggin' brilliant. I probably have in a drawer next to me, I probably have 4 or 5 wah pedals
Mhm.
because I've gone through every iteration. Like I had the that Buddha wah, like boudoir from
Mhm.
like when Buddha was first doing them. I love that thing. That thing's great. And then I had the Crybaby from Hell, which was Dimebag Darrell's wah pedal, and then I kind of moved to that exotic wah, that 3/4 size wah.
Right.
Um, but like when you told us that, when you were talking to us about that pedal and about the different circuit boards that you can swap in and out, I'm like, that is the most friggin' brilliant thing I've ever heard anybody do in this industry. Was a wah pedal because you
I
don't hear about that with wahs.
No, and it kind of when I first started thinking about it, I mean, I really searched, figuring somebody had to have done this before, because it just seemed like one of those ideas that was so simple. Because if you look at the schematic of a wah circuit, for the most part, the circuit is all the same. Is, there's a couple parts values difference, but the base circuit is the same. And I'm going, well, why spend, you know, $1,200, $1,500 on half a dozen wahs or whatever the case may be, when all they're really doing is changing some parts.
Right.
Now, are you going to get are you going to get a vintage Clyde that's going to sound absolutely phenomenal? Sure, absolutely. They're out there. I've had crybabies that have just been amazing. And for whatever reason, whatever's going on inside, for however far the parts drifted in value, they just sound phenomenal. But for a studio guy who's doing different sessions or whatever, I'm going, why would you want to haul around 5 different wahs?
Right.
When you can take 5 minutes, undo 2 screws, pull the connector apart, and slide in, a vintage, spec of whatever particular wah that you want. So I thought it was a cool idea. And
it is a cool idea.
Let's run with this. Let's figure out how to make this happen and how I can make it easy. And for the most part, the spec boards do sell well. Guys like to try stuff. I've had guys who've gotten spec boards and loved them. For the most part, people stick with the stock circuit because it really covers a lot of ground. The only two that it can't approximate are the original gray Vox wah, because some of the parts values are significantly different, and the color sound.
Oh yeah.
The color sound wah's got a very distinct sound. But I think the vintage Clyde and the vintage Crybaby, they're in the stock circuit. You just got to figure out where in the sweep.
Yeah.
To approximate those. But again, I'm going, this is so simple. I can't believe nobody's thought of it.
Yeah, you're like, I did.
Yeah, I'm going, yeah. I'm waiting for a cease and desist letter from somebody. Going,
well, I hope that never comes, because I think you did it first, man. Hey, let me ask you. So, like, with I've had like crybabies. Like when I was first starting guitar and I bought a crybaby, they were notorious for the pots getting scratchy and terrible. Have you ever kind of run into an old like Clyde or something where it's like the pot is still totally fine, everything works on it, like no that stuff?
Yeah. I've had a couple vintage units that were fine. I mean, it all depends on what their life was like.
Right.
If they were playing in bars and on stages every night, it's unavoidable. You're going to get dirt in them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's gonna scratch out at some point. But I mean, if it's been sitting in some guy bought it new in late '60s and it's been sitting in his closet ever since,
golden.
Yeah, obviously, there's a pretty good chance it's going to still be in good shape.
Yeah, that's so cool, man. Yeah, I'm sure that you've probably come across so much cool shit in your career, like in terms of gear and guitars and amps and stuff like that, where you run across old vintage pedals. And it's to me, I've never owned a vintage. Now I have a chorus from Boss from the early 80s that feels vintage to me, but like I've never owned any vintage gear. I had a 1971 twin reverb that was pretty great. It was a silver panel twin reverb, but again, like you said, heavy AF. Like I don't want to be. I was in Boston at the time, carrying around a twin reverb into like bars to play gigs. I'm like, dude, this is way too loud. It's way too heavy. Like, how can you even wrap your head around that stuff? But I'm sure you've come across some stuff where you're like, oh, I would carry that. It sounded that good.
I have come across some really cool stuff. The thing is, I'm not really a collector.
Yeah.
So I certainly there's a monetary limit for me. Like I got to a point, and I go, no, I'm not going to pay that much. But I've come across some stuff. I've had some very rare pieces. I had an original Tees Mofob, which I don't think there's a whole lot of out there. I'll hold on to it for a while, and then I'll pass it on to somebody who's going to enjoy it.
That's cool.
The last thing I need is more. I have enough of my own core stuff. The last thing I need to start doing is holding on to everything that I ever come across that's cool.
Yeah.
I had I had the Univibe, the original Univibe that I had, that I modeled the Model 915 on. Incredible sounding unit.
Mm-hmm.
Sold it to a guy who loves it.
Yeah.
If I'm not a big fan of letting things collect dust.
Yeah, it's good to not be precious about that stuff, man. Like
the stuff I've been very fortunate in the stuff that I've come across some phenomenal examples of gear, but it's I don't play in a band. I'm not recording. I don't tour. This stuff needs to be played. It needs to be enjoyed.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude.
I'd rather get it into the hands of somebody who's going to use it.
Yeah. Amen. All right, let me pop this up here. BV, thank you for moderating the chat today. Per usual, everybody's got to go check out BMF Effects. Tons of great stuff. After hearing clips from every single one of his pedals in his line at NAMM, I was like, dude, this guy's doing it right. Absolutely doing it right. All right, Scott. So I do the lightning round get down at the end of the show here. And what it is, it's a 10-question rapid fire thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you 10 this or that questions. Okay. I'm going to put on a metronome for some suspense.
Oh, Jesus. Okay.
It's nothing big, though. All right. So 10 questions.
Mm-hmm.
Starts like this. It always starts like this, actually.
Okay.
Lennon or McCartney?
Lennon.
Ice cream in a cup or in a waffle cone?
Waffle cone.
Metal film or carbon film resistors?
Carbon.
Vacation or European vacation? I'm talking
European.
Chevy Chase.
Oh, okay. Vacation. The original.
Okay. All right. In the honor of Mark Ford, Amorica or Southern Harmony?
Southern Harmony.
Okay. Bubble bath or hot tub?
Hot tub.
Les Paul Special or Telly with P90s?
Les Paul Special.
Okay. All right. So if you could fly coach free for the rest of your life or first class for 1 year, which one of those would you choose?
Coach rest of my life.
Price is Right or Press Your Luck?
Price is Right.
All right. And here's the last one, Scott. If you could take one album, it does not have to be your favorite album of all time, but if you could take one album and erase it from your memory just so you could go back and experience it for the first time again, what album would that be?
Humble Pie Performance, Rockin' the Fillmore.
Okay, cool. How come? Tell me more.
It was one of those albums I swiped it out of my dad's record collection, and it's one of those ones that I put out. And I mean, what isn't there like? I mean, Steve Marriott, possibly one of the greatest soul singers ever. Frampton, at his absolute power best. The two of them. I mean, it's a killer album.
Yeah. I don't know if I've ever listened to that record.
It's rock and roll. It's you sit there and you go, this is amps on 10. At the legendary Fillmore, and it's everything rock and roll should be.
Yeah, man. Okay, well, I'm gonna go check that out. I'm gonna write that down right now because I don't know that I've heard that album in its entirety. So. Okay. Got it. All right, man. Scott, dude, thank you so much for doing this. It was an absolute pleasure meeting you at NAMM. You're a wonderful human being, and I love what you're doing. Keep doing it.
Appreciate the support.
Yeah, man. Anything else to here? I'll pop up the Instagram page so everybody can check that out too. Just look up at BMF_effects and you'll find that. Anything new coming? Anything that anyone should be aware of to keep their eyes on Instagram or any kind of announcements?
Well, we did a version 2 of The Godfather which we talked about earlier, being my favorite pedal. I don't make revisions unless it's something in functionality. And this one, the version 2, has a toggle switch that allows you to choose whether the two sides are A/B or A+B. It gives you the option to do 2 channels or stack them. The dual liquid sky, which was a pet project.
Okay.
Which I think you guys saw at NAMM. A bunch of stuff coming out.
Okay.
I don't want to jinx supply chain issues and give hard dates, but yeah, we're, there's a good almost half dozen pedals coming out this year.
Oh dang. Okay.
And we're already halfway through the year, so there's going to be a rapid fire succession of new releases.
All right, we will keep our eyes peeled. Everybody, make sure you go and follow them on Instagram. Also, check out the website. Amazing stuff. Scott, you can hang for a second, but thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Everybody else, take care of yourself. Take care of each other. We'll see you next time.